Further complicating matters, soon thereafter Yalta, was that FDR had made his way back home to his retreat in Georgia. And soon thereafter, of course, he'd been having some health issues. He had a severe brain hemorrhage and he died. That's going to throw a whole monkey wrench into everything. So, the era of the New Deal, uh, everything else that FDR had done, especially with our entry into the Great War, all of that's now over. And of course, constitutionally speaking, when the president dies, the vice president is to immediately become inaugurated and become president. Harry Truman becomes president in April 1945. What a time, right? You get thrust right into the fire. And immediately, President Truman wants to begin a process to where he gets tough with the Soviets. Yeah, the war in Europe is coming to an end. We're going to get tough with these Soviets who have violated all kinds of different terms of Yalta and other different places and other different agreements that they thought they had had. When in reality, Harry Truman trying to get tough was reasonably pointless. The Soviet army had, by this time, already occupied large swaths of Eastern Europe, including eastern parts of Germany. The United States was still very heavily engaged in a large Pacific conflict. We could not reallocate resources to Europe. There really wasn't a whole lot of leverage that Harry Truman could utilize against Soviet occupation of eastern parts of Europe. Okay. So he met in Potsdam in the eastern half of Germany with Stalin and Churchill, and they agreed to adjust the Polish and German border to various different Soviet distinctions. Because the Soviet Union occupied large swaths of eastern Germany, they wanted to extract reparations from Germany itself. However, the western part of Germany had largely been occupied by Allied forces in the United States, Great Britain, and of course now France. At Potsdam, it was agreed that the Soviet Union, while they wanted to extract reparations from Germany, they would not be able to do so under parts of Germany that are occupied by American, British, and French forces. Hmm. So now you're starting to see an eastern swath of Germany controlled by the Soviet communists, and the western side of Germany controlled by pro democratic Americans, Brits, and French. Hmm. Hold that thought. Um, China in the picture. China was seen as being a strong opportunity for there to be large world peace. China had been hammered for the better part of centuries, really. If you look at Chinese history, there are all kinds of conflicts and things that have divided China. However, American hopes for a peaceful world lay in China. The problem with China is that the government under Chiang Kai shek at that time, which had largely been pro West, pro America, was very corrupt and in disarray. The Chinese public largely did not trust the Chiang Kai shek government. And for the better part of 20 years or so, the Chiang regime had actually been at odds with a pro communist revolutionary political force under Mao Zedong. And Mao was beginning to gain influence. The problem is, Mao was pro communist. The United States did not want another communist country. The United States was fearful of communism. He did not want another Asian communist government to deal with. So, the United States, around this time, decided to very loosely support the Chiang regime, as highly imperfect as they were and as much influence as Mao Zedong had gained. Should there be a Chinese civil war, the United States would send arms and money to Chiang Kai shek. Ultimately, though, Harry Truman realized that doing so would be futile. Chiang Kai shek's regime was so disjointed and not liked by the Chinese population. They were so corrupt. Eventually, things would go quite the other way. But before it does, the United States decides if we're going to have an Asian influence with large economic opportunity, how about instead of focusing on China, how about we help reestablish our World War II rival, the Japanese? We've defeated them. Um, Japan can be reorganized from an economic standpoint to be a pro-West, pro-American country. Yes, even though we destroyed them and bombed them with nuclear weapons, yes. They could be a pro-American sphere of influence in East Asia with massive economic capability. So it was decided, because of the China issue, that the United States would focus on rebuilding Japan's economy and promoting them as an Asian power that would be pro-America. That is why, to this day, Japan and the United States have some of our strongest economic ties. Japan is by far one of the United States' largest economic and political allies in the world. Japan is a crucial economic partner for us. They are very important. Japan's success is important to America's success. So yes, even though we had been immense rivals, we're now about to be very strong economic allies, and rightly so. And you can see the benefits of Japanese economic expansion to this day. I mean, think about how many cars you see driving on the road that are Japanese made. I have one. I have a Honda Accord. Okay. I've driven another Honda Accord. I had a Mazda back in the day. A lot of your electronics, TVs, a lot of your technological innovation, you see a lot of that from Japan. Okay. They have a different mindset about quality and how things are made. Okay. So, yeah, while China is suffering its issues, we're now going to uplift Japan. Okay? That's something we're going to do. The United States also recognizes how communism can kind of spread its tentacles all throughout the world. So, the United States being pro democratic and pro capitalist, we want to begin a containment strategy that would keep Soviet expansion from getting too far out of control to where they get their tentacles all over the world. So the United States recognized that Joseph Stalin was trying to gain access to various different sea lanes in the Black Sea, in the Mediterranean, Turkey, Greece, around there. He was trying to establish a pro-communist puppet government in Greece that would threaten Western democracies and our ability to gain influence there in the Eastern Mediterranean. So, all right. Harry Truman, under his doctrine, would enact the idea of sending money to Greece to thwart a communist incursion and build a Greek and Turkish army that would resist communism. Okay. So, in doing so, we're trying to ease tensions between Greece and Turkey itself, which had been millenniums or centuries, even 2,000 or 3,000 years old. Otherwise, though, we wanted to expand our influence in Eastern Mediterranean, contain communism and Soviet influence. In doing so, some people in the United States saw a containment strategy as being weak. We don't want to just merely contain communism. We want to push back on it. And we want to maybe perhaps threaten militarily in order to be able to do so. Others felt, oh, we don't want to contain communism. Communism's okay. It's fine. You have some hardcore leftists who actually were communist sympathizers who actually wanted to perhaps uh, bring communism to the United States, or at least increase its influence. And other conservatives were severely threatened by communism. They wanted to perhaps go to war. The idea there is a happy medium. Containment is going to be the answer, not appeasement, and certainly not military action. We've had too much of that enough in the first place anyway. So then you have a question. At what point does containment end? Does military action actually have any sort of merit? Otherwise, though, these are all discussions that take place around this time.